Hello and welcome, and it's good to have you with us today. We begin with an issue that sparked heated debate across the nation: gun control. Last night, people both for and against more gun regulation gathered in Virginia for a town hall with President Obama. Both sides got a chance to talk to him in an intimate setting, with most wanting to know what would these additional steps actually do to prevent gun violence. Diane Gallagher has this report.
Thank you.
President Obama came face-to-face Thursday with Americans passionate about gun control, answering tough questions from both sides and trying again to dispel what he called a conspiracy.
We put out a proposal that is common sense, modest, does not claim to solve every problem, is respectful of the Second Amendment, and the way it is described is that we're trying to take away everybody's guns.
He heard from Taya Kyle, the wife of murdered American sniper Chris Kyle.
The thing is that the laws that we create don't stop these horrific things from happening.
Gabby Giffords, the congresswoman shot 5 years ago, and her husband, astronaut Mark Kelly.
As you know, Gabby and I are both gun owners. We take gun ownership very seriously.
Conspicuously missing from the crowd at George Mason University, however, the NRA leadership, which declined CNN's invitation.
I'm happy to meet with him. I'm happy to talk to him. But the conversation has to be based on facts and truth and what we're actually proposing.
The president's executive actions would expand background checks and narrow the so-called gun show loophole, which exempts many small and private sellers from keeping records. An Arizona sheriff wanted to know how that would keep guns from the hands of criminals or the mentally ill.
Crime is always going to be with us. So I think it's really important for us not to suggest that if we can't solve every crime, we shouldn't try to solve any crimes.
And perhaps what is most being taken away from this, from critics and those who watched alike, is the tone of the event. It was very respectful, but that doesn't really take away from just how thorny this issue is. A new CNN ORC poll found that the majority of Americans support the measures in the president's executive action, but less than half of Americans actually believe it will do anything to cut down on gun violence. I'm Diane Gallagher in Washington.
And joining us now with his reaction to the town hall and some other pressing issues in the District of Columbia is Council Chairman Phil Mendelson. Good to see you, Council Chairman. So a lot of talk on guns last night. What do you think? Will anything actually come of the president's gun initiatives?
Well, there's no question that the initiatives help to improve the regulatory system. I find it very unfortunate the way this debate has evolved over the last decade. It seems to be an all or nothing. That is, that there should be no regulations or that any regulations are too much. And that's really very unfortunate in my view. I don't think there's any controversy that somebody who's mentally ill should not have a gun. I don't know how we prevent somebody who's mentally ill from having a gun if we don't have a regulatory scheme. Now, that regulatory scheme in the district may be different than what it would be in Wyoming. Very different areas, very different context, if you will. We're an urban, dense area with a lot of crime, and rural areas don't have that kind of situation. But you still have to have a regulatory scheme. And where this debate seems to have gone, largely driven by the NRA, which I think over the years has become a veiled lobby for gun manufacturers, is that there can't be any regulation. That what we need to do is put millions, billions of dollars into our mental health system, and not to say that we shouldn't put dollars there, but that we should do nothing with regard to regulating guns, including, because this is NRA backed, prohibiting any research on a national level with regard to the causes of gun violence or how to reduce gun violence. We have a problem in this country that doesn't exist in any other industrial country in this world. There is much more gun violence here than you will see in Canada or England or France or Germany, much more. And we seem to have our heads in the sand about it.
Well, the president did admit that gun violence is not going to go away. He was trying to crack down on it.
Well, yeah, what we heard in that clip was crime won't go away. And, you know, we have laws on the books that make it illegal to commit a robbery. Well, people commit robberies, so should we repeal the laws? No.
Well, one of the fine print here is Congress has to fund these initiatives. I mean, Congress has to say, yes, we're going to allocate X amount of dollars for more FBI agents for these background checks and this amount of money for more mental health research. Is that going to happen?
I don't know. I mean, I think that's really, I hate to use the word, the tragedy of the situation is that it's become so polarized, and it's about how the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed means you can't do anything, even though all of our core rights in the Bill of Rights have some regulation around them. I'm not allowed to yell fire in a movie theater. I'm not, even though we have freedom of speech and we treasure freedom of speech. Our rights are regulated to some extent, every one of them.
Talk about those local regulations for a minute. I mean, D.C. has some of the strictest gun laws in the country, right? You can't carry a gun in the district. You can't buy or sell one, right? You have to have it registered. So how will this gun executive action affect the District of Columbia?
Well, I'm not sure what President Obama is proposing will affect the district directly. Among other things, he's trying to open, to the extent he can, avenues for research. He is trying to close, to the extent he can, the gun show loophole. We don't have gun shows in the District of Columbia. Now, yes, we have regulations in the district, and many people say they're among the most strict in the country. People can carry because we have revised our law to permit carry permits. They can't open carry, and they have to have a demonstrated need to carry. That is consistent with our law dating back before the Civil War, and we do allow people to register. It's true you can't buy a gun in the district, but that's not because of our law. That's because there are no gun dealers in the district, and there haven't been for maybe 40 or 50 years.
Let's move on to gun violence in
Sure.
the District of Columbia, because it has been a big issue. And last year, of course, there was that huge spike in homicides, 162 homicides, which was a 54% spike in that rate.
A 54% increase,
yes. Yeah. So the mayor has announced her plan for fighting violent crime, and it includes a controversial provision allowing warrantless searches of former violent offenders, among other things, incentives to keep police officers from retiring, and higher penalties for violent crimes. Where does the mayor's plan stand right now, and what does council have as far as fighting violent crime?
Well, the mayor introduced her legislation, her proposals, several months ago, and she's now insisting that the council is moving too slowly. But in fact, when one is looking at the criminal law, one should be careful in terms of changes. Some of her proposals, I think, are good. Among others, trying to slow the retirement bubble in the police department. I think that that's necessary. Some of her proposals, I think, are questionable. The idea of longer sentences, the research shows that longer sentences do not have a deterrent effect. We have a 30-year mandatory minimum for first-degree homicide, and yet we had an increase in homicides last year. So longer sentences are not shown in the research to be a deterrent, but that's part of her proposal. The warrantless searches, which has been very controversial, I happen to agree with her on that. It's not truly a warrantless search. What it is a person who's in the criminal justice system, who's still being supervised, but has been released on probation or parole, that as a condition of probation or parole, they consent to reasonable searches without a search warrant during reasonable times with the specific purpose of if there's a suspicion that there is a gun present. We have to do something to focus on gun offenders, particularly repeat gun offenders. And in my view, we need to turn up the heat on them, and the searches is one of the ways to do that.
I understand that Councilman Kenyon McDuffie has come up with, and some other council members come up with another plan to fight violent crime. How did the two plans, the councils and the mayors, sort of mesh, or will there be a hybrid, and when is it coming up for a vote?
Well, I expect there'll be a hybrid. What Mr. McDuffie proposed was a number of initiatives aimed at getting at the causes of crime and also at the causes of recidivism. I mean, the fact of the matter is that oftentimes crime is a manifestation, or criminal activity is a manifestation of a person who has a dysfunctional life. And that's kind of obvious, but we don't think of it that way. A life where it's hard for them to get employment or hard for them to get housing. And so if we can address some of those causes, that should have, in the long term, a benefit in reducing crime.
One important area is police staffing, and the police numbers have fallen below 3,800. Is that enough officers to get the job done in the district, and what's being done to try to keep police officers from leaving and hiring new ones?
I would like to see the number higher, but that does not mean that folks should feel that it's unsafe. The number of officers right now is higher than it was maybe 10 years ago. It's at a number that is not unseen. But the chief has made a case in the past, and I agree with her that there ought to be more officers. We saw this retirement bubble coming. I know that the union tries to say this is because of widespread unhappiness. I don't see that. The fact is that 25 years ago we went on a hiring binge, and we're paying for it now in a way that we didn't foresee, which is namely the more people are going to retire. And we have good retirement benefits, which is important in attracting new hires. So we're hiring. We're hiring about 300, 350 new officers a year, but right now the retirements exceed that.
Okay. Police are going to be wearing body cameras in the new year. Tell us a little bit more about that. Will every officer wear one?
The mayor's proposal was that all uniformed officers would be wearing body cameras. And I think it is a great initiative for accountability. I think there's been a lot of misunderstanding from the debate about transparency. Transparency is, I'm not quite sure what that means, but accountability is important. When a person alleges that a police officer mistreated them, well, now we have a body camera which will provide evidence that we didn't have before as to what truly happened. Or when a police officer alleges that a suspect fled or assaulted him, well, now we have a body camera which provides that evidence. I think that's very important. And it's interesting because 5, 10 years ago, police departments across the country opposed that kind of thing, and now they see that it actually is helpful.
So not only helpful for acquittals or
it's helpful for convictions and acquittals,
and also the public perception.
And public confidence in the police and accountability as to what an officer actually did.
All right, we have lots more to talk about, and we hope you'll stick around. We'll take a quick break right here.